In the Black Gemara, we are up to Daf Mem Vav Amid Aleph. Okay, about 8 lines on the top of the page. Tana Rabbanan. We learned. It says in Pasuk, again, we're still talking about the Moiti Shemra, that the punishment is if he concocted the story, brought witnesses, that he pays 100 shkolim, plus he gets malchus. Tana Rabbanan, we learned. It says in Pasuk, Anshu Oisa, we punish him paying 100 shkolim, Zeh Mammon. That is the money, the monetary side of the penalty. And then it says the pasuk v'yosru. Another pasuk says the zikni take that person, and the yosru they punish him. What is that talking about? That's malchus. Says the Gemara. How do we know that the yosru means lashes? It doesn't say in the pasuk you give him lashes. It says the yosru. So b'shlei v'anshu punishment zemam and dechsiv. It says clear in the pasuk v'anshu oisim meya kesef. It describes what that punishment is. The nasla v'inayin, and you pay that over to the father of the girl. Ela v'yosru zemalkus menon. How in the world do you know that the word v'yosru means lashes? That's the penalty lashes. Amar Abavu, Lamada, we learn out yosru. We learn out the word yosru that's written over here from the yosru from another pasuk. It says another pasuk that if a person has a child, a ben murder, a glutton, and a rebel who doesn't listen to the voice of his father or his mother, and there says the pasuk also that v'yosru oisei. And so what's for Yosru? So we learn out Yosru, it's written by here from Yosru to Ben Seri Moira. And how do we know what to do by Ben Seri Moira? And the Yosru me Ben. There it says in the pasuk is a Ben Seri Moira, and we have another pasuk where it says V'hoye im bin, that if you're intelligent, then you should give lashes to the Rasha, and it says in the pasuk you should give him 40 lashes. Yakenu. So it says the bin, and it says the Ben Seri from Bin over here. Well, you've been hakas a Russia. So that's how we know through this long-winded way that v'yosr means lashes. So you want to find. Every time the Torah administers a punishment, there has to be another pasuk which gives us a warning first. As hara l'moiti shemra minolan. So where is the warning for moiti shemra? And we discussed this yesterday already. And Gemara says that we have an argument with, is it a din like in moiti shemra or is it a general din? You know, we learned from it said you shouldn't go ahead and slander people, and don't stand and witness the blood of your friends. So therefore, not slandering. That's where these lashes come from. Rav Nosson says no. From the pasuk it says v'nishmarta mikol dovera. You should guard yourself from any dovera, from any bad thing. And we touch dover as if it says dibur, bad speech. You have to be careful from any bad speech. And nishmarta is a loisasa. You have to make sure you don't give any bad speech. But Abelazar, my time, why does Abelazar agree with the pasuk when Ishmarta? Rather, he brings the pasuk with Rachel. He used for something else. Like Pinchas ben Yoyer. We don't have a Pinchas Yoyer that often giving us halachos. Ishmarta mikol davra. He says, you know what Ishmarta mikol davra means? Mikan from here learn that. Oh, Pinchas Yoyer. Al yahared. Be careful from causing yourself to do bad things. Al yahared out of the game. You shouldn't think during the day having lewd thoughts, because the Yovel did Tumah B'Layla. You'll come to Tumah at night, because the next pasuk talks about that if a person has a mikra lo'toyer, talks about a person has something that an event that is not toyer. So that's what it's talking about here. When it has been shmart to koldora, means don't have lewd thoughts. Rav Nosson, who brings this pasuk, my time, why does it mean the pasuk will say Rachel? So interesting, he has a play on words. Ahu, he says, Rachel has nothing to do with committing slander. You know what it means? It's a din to bezin, as horror of bezin. It's actually a warning, admonishing a bezin. So the judges in the bezin, shelo yehei rach lezeh v'kosher lezeh. They take the word rach and break it into 2 parts. And they say that what? It means rach li. I mean, don't be soft to one person and harsh with another person. You have to treat both the defendant and the litigant equally. Says the Gemara, now when we say that the whole story of Moitei Shemra is not just he comes and concocts a story, he has to bring witnesses along with it. So the question is, does he have to, and the false witnesses, the question is, does he have to buy them or pay them, or even if he doesn't pay them, just commissions them, ask them a favor, what happens? So if he did not tell witnesses, if he didn't invite the witnesses, but they just came on their own, who ain't no like it, and it's not considered as if he commissioned them, so he doesn't get the punishment of lashes, so he does not give the $100. What he The same expression we had yesterday, that she and the Adim that were found liars, Magdimin lebeisa skilla. You bring them, like I said before yesterday, the first thing in the morning, you bring them to the house of stoning. There's no way out, and you stone them. Now, what do you mean? He well, they both get punished. Either it's the truth, it's not the truth. Only one that gets punished. Ella oihi, if it's the truth, she. If it's not the truth, they. Magdila beis skilla. Says Gemara, time so it means or. It's not both, as if it's to say or. So it says clearly right. It's a time but the only thing is because he didn't commission it. If he did invite the witnesses, even though he didn't hire them, he didn't actually pay them any money, is what? He's still considered a Moitzi Shemra. Turns out to be liars, he gets penalized as well, not just the witnesses. And this comes to negate another opinion, who says that the only time you consider a Moitzi Shemra is if you actually hired the witnesses. So you were complicit in their testimony. This comes to negate the opinion of Yehuda. You actually have to hire the witnesses to give false testimony. My time, Rabbi Yehuda, what's the logic of Rabbi Yehuda? Sima. We learn out the word sima. Here it says, when it comes to Moitzi Shemra, it says, there's some law he placed alilas dvarim. He placed a concocted story, he made up a story. Uksiv Hasam, and there's another passage where it says regarding ribus, it says that by interest, loisa siman olav neshech, you should not place on them, and there's ribus that bites away. So malahal, when it comes to ribus, it comes to interest. Mammon, obviously we're talking about money, is afkan here too. Mammon, we are talking about money. So we have Gzeir Shava, sima. Taisha says not exactly Gzeir Shava, as we'll see in a minute in the Gemara. Amram Nachem by Yitzchak v'chein Rabbi Yosef Tzoroni, by Rabbi Shimon Yochai. He sold to Rabbi Yosef Tzoroni in the yeshiva of Rabbi Shimon Yochai. He learned Asya Sima. This Gzeir Shava called Sima. That's how we know that he actually hired the witnesses. Boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah, since we're learning from interest, Sachran bekarka mao. What happened instead of paying them with money, he paid them with property? What happens in that case over there? Or what happens? Though if you're learning out from ribus is when it comes to money. Everything is portable, either food, something which is value of money, or money, something metaltal. But what about karka? And Taisha says an interesting thing. Taisha says to the team that if you let's say lend somebody 10 vines and you charge him that he has to give back to you 11 vines, that's not ribus, because it's karka. It's only ribus is if it's money or something it can be turned into money, something metallic, something portable, which is fascinating halacha. Taisha says shema. Perhaps in this case it's not ribus. So what happens if you paid the witnesses with karka, according to Rabbi Yehuda? Is that considered Moitzi Shemra? What happens? What happens if it's less than a shava pruta? What happens then? Because the ribus is only for the value of a pruta. What happens if you pay them less than a pruta? Or if you tell me that you have to pay them a pruta, what happens? Okay, I gave a pruta, but I told two witnesses you share the pruta together. Is that considered hiring the witnesses or not? Thinking about it further. Boy, Rav Ashi says, and Taisha says that we know ribus is like from the Gemara in Ezer Neshech. We know that ribus is not less than a pruta, because the Gemara asks, why do you need a lav by stealing and a lav by ribus? So, what do you call it? And stealing is not less than a pruta, which is interesting because the Rambam says clearly that stealing does exist less than a pruta, just so you don't have to pay it back, because they're meichel, but you're still in avera. Either because the Magamish says Chatzishir or whatever, it's still available. Taisa seems to learn that there's no Isser of stealing less than a Shava Pruta. And therefore, Ribas also, there's no Isser less than a Shava Pruta. Otherwise, the Gemara wouldn't have a question why you need a lamb by Ribas to tell you even less than a Pruta. Anyway, the Gemara remains the question, so it's clear. The fact that we have a question means it's not a Gzil Gzeh Shava. It'd be a real Gzeh Shava, that whatever the laws are by Ribas, the same law would be here by hiring witnesses. Because we have this question, is it different? It means it's not exactly the same. Boy, Rav has a question. Interesting. You married this woman, and then you divorced her, and then you married again, and now the second marriage, right away you say, and he hires witnesses or he invites witnesses that say that the first time they got married, this is what happened. It's a very odd case, because then why would you marry a second time? But he did. What would the din be then? Is there a din of Moitzi Shemra or not? What about Achimau? Let's say the person who married her died, and the brother comes and they didn't consummate the marriage, and the next brother, the Yavam, marries her, and he says that there's is there a law of Moitzi Shemra or not? That it turns out to be, if it falls, does he get punished the money and the lashes? So you want to trade me a chad? At least I can resolve this question. He said, "As bitina sati lisha." The father says in response, "I gave my daughter to this man by yavam. You never gave it to the yavam. I gave it to this man. I never gave it to the yavam." So it says yesterday we learned there was a Rabban and there was a Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov to know whether they actually had to have relations before he becomes a Moitz Shemra or not. The Tanya we learned Keitzad Hoitzah Shemra. What exactly? What's the process of a Moitz Shemra? Bezin, he fronts up to the court, the husband, and this person says, I did not. I married your daughter and I did not find her to be a psulam, a virgin. If there are witnesses that want that she committed adultery while she was engaged, then and Bryce says, which is very hard to understand, as Morris will point out, then she's entitled only to $100 because she's not a psulah, it's only a bulla. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. She gets a ksuva $100, she'll get killed. She would commit adultery while she was engaged. Yes, money is $100. Baskili, she gets killed. This is what you meant to say. You're right. If there were witnesses that while they were engaged, she committed adultery, of course she'll get killed. But if Zinsa Mikara, the witnesses say that she was Mazana before they got married, okay, so she didn't commit a sin, but she's no longer a psula. And we had a big argument before in Gemara Daf Aleph, whether she's entitled, do we say that she's entitled to $100, or we say it's a mekach tosh, she gets nothing because he thought he's marrying a psula. It turned out to be that she wasn't. But so this Bryce holds, yes, look, Suleiman. She has a ksuva of $100. Okay, let me continue. What happens? Nimtza Shemra turned out to be the whole thing was a baba ma'isa. Ain't no shame. Yeah, Shemra ain't no shemra who like it, but nice. So he gets he like it, but nice and may sell bain ball belay ball. It turned out to be the whole thing was a baba ma'isa. So then he gets a full punishment. He gets a full punishment, which is wanted full punishment. He has to pay the $100, and he gets what do you call it? He gets a punishment as well. Okay, so anyway, Nimsa Shemra ain't a Shemra. It turned to be that his bad story about his wife was not a true story. It's a bubma. He concocted it, then he gets punishment. Bain ball, bain loy ball. Doesn't matter whether he actually had a relationship with her or not. That Brother Yaakov says, it only matters, the whole story is only if they actually had relations. Now, if you look at the pasuk, before we go on, if you look at the pasuk, the father says that, the pasuk that he made up, he came along with these accusations, and he says, I didn't find him psulim. And the father says, I'm just reading the pasuk here, these are the psulim, my daughter, and uparsu hasim and he spreads out the sheet in front of them showing the blood. Now, the fact that he's showing blood seems very clear that they had relations, otherwise, where's the blood coming from? So, what's exactly pshat there? So, says the Gemara, what do you mean the Chacham say whether they had relations or not? There's one passage where it says, that they actually had relations, that it says in the passage they had relations. It says, a man, took a woman, and they had relations, and he hated her, and they came up with the story. Literally means that they had relations. And then the other passage where it says the ekra ve'leh, his tiny is I got close to her and I couldn't find any blood. Doesn't that? I mean, just reading the Torah, it seems clearly they had relations and he didn't find any blood. El Rabbanan, how do they explain it? Maya boleh the ekra ve'leh. What do you mean boleh the ekra ve'leh? According to them, even if he didn't have relations, the same thing happens. More explained. Uboleh means ba'alilis. He came with all kinds of allegations. The ekra ve'leh bidvarim. And he came along again with words, not that he had any physical relations. I didn't find any psulim, or we had relations. I couldn't find any blood. What do you mean? What does that mean? He means according to Rabbanan, what it means is that I couldn't find for your daughter kishnei psulim. I couldn't find for your daughter witnesses that will repudiate what these witnesses are saying that your daughter was mazana. I couldn't find anyone to oppose that. So that's what it means. Not I didn't find psulim. I didn't find anybody to support her that she would be a psulim, but we didn't have physical relations. So that's how they're twisting around all the psukim. I was reinterpreting the psukim. The father said, these are the psulim of my daughter, because they had relations. El Rabbanan, they had no relations. These are the psulim of my daughter. It means, based on what the Rabbanan said before, these are the witnesses who are supporting my daughter's story. Bishlev Rabbi Yaakov, I see it says in Pasik, Uparsu Hasimla, and he spreads out the sheet showing that they were bloodstains. They never had relations. Maya Parsu Hasimla. Rabu says Parsu they spread out. It means naturally spread out, but Parsu he explained. Masha Shamla. He basically explained what happened over there. You learn the witnesses of the husband comes along and said they should commit adultery. Comes along his witnesses, the father's witnesses that you weren't even there at the time. And they sort out what actually happened, like a brand new dress, and we start all over again, and then we'll prove the veracity of one way or another. So, but not physically that he actually showed the sheet with the bloodstains. It's also more a legal battle. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, he disagrees. He says, Simla Mamish. No, they had relations. Therefore, the father brought over the sheet, demonstrating there was blood spots there. And therefore, she was a psula. Shalach Rabbi Yitzchak by Yaakov Bar Yoyri. Rabbi Yitzchak Rabbi Yaakov named Rabbi Yechon. We don't find anywhere in the Torah when it comes to the sins, let's say, of incest. We don't make a difference of whether they had a conventional relation or whether they had unconventional relation. As long as they had intimacy, and even the non-conventional way, he committed the same sin, because it says Mishkav Isha in plural, doesn't matter which way they went. We generally don't make a difference between the two ways of having intimacy. When it comes to lashes and when it comes to punishment, it makes absolutely no difference. Any way is an issue for incest and all the other arayas. However, when it comes to Motzei Shemra, there's a difference. What do you mean there's a difference? This is what the Brisa says, that you had to have relations. No, it's not like the Rabbanon who say that the Motzei Shemra, you don't even have to have relations, just got married. You had to have some kind of relations, but what kind of relations did you have? The non-conventional way. And you're making a story that you did the conventional way and there was no blood spots. So you want to ask Kiman, who says this particular method? You don't have to have any relations. And you had to have relations, which is the conventional way, and then you say, but I couldn't find any blood. But if you had the non-conventional way, and then you accuse her of not being a psula, how would you know? How would you know? You didn't have the conventional kind of intimacy. Ella, so the Gemara says, this we amended. Ella Sholach Rav Kahana Mishmei Rabbi Yechon. Kahana said Rabbi Yechon. This is actually Rabbi Yechon who said, not the way you said the name of Rabbi Yechon. Ein chayiv. The only way according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov you're chayiv. And this is the halacha. Yivel kedarka. You had the process. You got married. You had the conventional way of intimacy, and you accuse her that you didn't find any psulah. Yitzi shemen kedarka. And you accuse her of that there was no blood, there was no psulah there. Okay, continuing talking about. We're talking about who gets the money from if she was forced upon or seduced. Now we're talking about ordinary kedushin. Who gets the money from ordinary kedushin, marrying off a daughter, a katana, or a naira till she's 12 and a half? Now the law is that till 12 years old, only the father can marry her off. And between 12 and 12 and a half, either the father can marry her off, or she can marry herself off. But once she is over 12 and a half, she's over adolescence, now she's an adult. But Begeres, only she has her own rights. So said the Mishnah of the father Zakoi Bebita, he has rights over his daughter B'Kedusha to marrying her off B'Kesef B'Shtar, whichever method it is, money. Or there's three ways. We'll learn the first Mishnah Kedushin, a girl can get married either with money or with a contract or through intimacy. In all three ways, the father has the right to marry her off that way. It's his right. And Zakoi, and he can marry her off to anybody he wants. We had the expression before, give her over even to somebody who's afflicted. It doesn't matter, it's totally his right. Also, Zakoi, he has rights. And the Gemara is going to explain each one of these rights. How do we know? Zakoi, is it from the Torah, the Rabbanon? Why is it? Zakoi, he also has rights, but if she finds anything, he goes straight to the father. Or as a ketano, even a naira, any earnings she has goes to the father. He cannot know any vows that she makes. If he married her off and then she receives the divorce, he gets it, he receives it. Now, only talking about they got engaged, because once she got married, she's no longer under the domain of her father. And if she gets divorced, she's now in control of her own life, own destiny, even though she's a minor, she's much younger. Or if she became a begeris, obviously during the marriage, she's no longer under even though they're engaged, the father no longer has the control. Says the Gemara, if let's say she gets a Yerusha from her mother's side of the family and went to her, the father does not eat the fruits of the produce of that particular field. All the produce he sets aside, like he opens a trust account on her behalf, and he builds up a nest egg, as we'll see later. Nisas, once she got married to a husband, what are the rights of a husband? Yes, about the husband has one more advantage over the father, that if she brings in, remember we learned before, there's nichse tzayim barzel and nichse malay. Nichse tzayim barzel is the father brings in like a dowry, the father of the kala, dowry, and he sets out in the kesuva, and they list every single product that he puts in there and the value of it, and then the husband basically during their marriage completely owns it. But if they get divorced, then or if he dies, then she takes back all of those assets for the value that's fixed in the contract. Whether it's more or less, it's irrelevant. That's called nichse tzayim barzel, the fixed assets. Then you have nichse malay, the plucked assets, where you don't really list these assets. She owns property that she inherited. These properties, we allow the husband to keep all the produce, an incentive that he should work on the fields, and then when he dies, he goes back to her, regardless of whether it's increased the value, decreased the value. She gets the field back. So the husband has the right to keep the produce. So the more than the father, he does keep the produce while she's alive. And the a husband is obligated to provide for his wife. If she was kidnapped, he has an obligation to ransom her. Obviously, it was pretty commonplace in those days, not so commonplace, but it was not as real as today. His obligation, if she passes away, if she predeceases him, he has to pay for all the burial costs. Rabbi Yehuda says, and how far the burial costs, that even somebody who's impoverished, the minimum he should do, besides burying, is to have two flutists, to have a woman who would stand there and do all kinds of hespedim and to cry and wail, as we'll see later. So let's go through each one of these. How do you know the father's rights to the money of the kedusha? I'm going to read across in the pasuk. It says, when a girl becomes 12 years old, she leaves her master. Once she reaches the age of puberty, she leaves her master. She leaves leave for free. Doesn't have to pay anything. Ain't kesef, and no money changes hands. Now, it's redundant. If it's chinam for free, then obviously there's no money changing hands. So we dashen, ain't kesef ladnezeh. She leaves this master, there's no money involved. But the kesef nach, there's another master that she has that she leaves, there's money involved. That money of your father. No, but if she gets married to somebody, the money that changes hands goes to the father. So that's different than the contrast to a master if she's a maid. Says the Gemara, all we know is that money changes hands. Who says it ends up with the father? Maybe it ends up with her. When she leaves at the age of 12 from being a maid, no money changes hands. If she gets married to somebody, money changes hands. But who said the money ends up with the father? Maybe the money ends up with her. Says the Gemara, Hashta says Hashta of the Mikabel Grusha. The father has the right to marry her off to anybody he wants. It says it beating the Sati Lisha by Moishe Shemra. It says I gave my daughter over to this person. It means he is in total control. She gets the money. That doesn't make sense. If he's in total control, then he should be the beneficiary of the money. Says maybe only a minor. Only by a minor do we say the money ends up with a father. The less layad, because a minor can't marry herself off at all. But a naira, once she's 12 years old, she has the right to marry herself off. Then even if the father married off, maybe the money ends up with her. That she can end up with her, and maybe ends up with her. Now, even though by Moitzi Shemra, that's what we learn out, the idea that the father has the right to marry her off. It can only be talking about a naira because it's a punishment to her, and if she's a tana, she doesn't get killed if it turned out to be true. But maybe he's talking about that they got married when got engaged when she was a tana, but now when the money's about to change hands, whatever it is, she's now a naira. Or the question is, you're right. When the father marries her off as a naira, of course the money ends up with the father. He married her off, he should get the money. But the question is, if she married herself off, a naira is permitted to marry herself off, maybe in that instance, the money should go to her. When it says Tana, it means a naira when she married herself off. On Makro, we find by the Dorim that the father can annul all the Dorim, because in the Pasuk, Binureha, the base of the that a father can cancel all the vows of the daughter when she's in the father's house. So we say that, so we learn Kol Shavach Nurim L'Avia. Anything benefits that she gets while she's even a naira ends up with the father. So that's why we say the Kedushin money ends up with the father. Says the Gemara, yeah, that pasuk is not. So you tell me the pasuk is not limited to vows. The pasuk is even talking about money things. Let me ask a question. I know that all the earnings that a daughter makes, everything ends up with the father. Shenemar says a pasuk that a father has the right to sell off his daughter as a maid, and if he sells her off as a maid, everything that she earns goes to her master. So if he has a right to sell off as a maid, that means he has total control of everything of hers, including her earnings. So of course, then if he didn't sell her off, it just stays at home. The money ends up with him. Just like by maid, the earnings end up with the master. So while he's at home, all the earnings end up with the father. What do you need the pasuk for? Just take the pasuk used for by vows, where it says, as a naira, whatever she has goes to her father. It's clear that pasuk is limited only that the father has a right to annul the vows, nothing to do with the money. That's why we need this other pasuk. So the question goes back. By Kedushin, if she's a naira and she's marrying herself off, or generally as a naira, how do you know the money ends up with the father? If you can tell me, nail if we know. Once we've established when it comes to vows, the father has control. Maybe automatically we learn out when it comes to money matters, the father has control. No, we have a rule that you cannot equate monetary laws and laws of Isur, which is, for example, vows. If you can tell me, nailif, miknosa, let's learn out from a penalty, because the din is by Mitzvah Shemra or by an oinus, a mefata. Where does the money, if somebody forces on a girl, the money ends up with the father, says that she gives to Avi and Naira, so from there we learn out that also Kedusha ends with the father. No. Remember, that's a knas, a penalty. The whole thing is a chiddush, no money. You don't really owe any money. The Torah levied a penalty upon you, so you can't learn anything from there because it's unique. Let's learn the boishes of pagam. There were other payments we learned as well, shame and pagam, which is hurting reputation, and that's true money because we go ahead and evaluate what the market is prepared to pay for these things, to tolerate these things, and that's money. And there also ends up with the father. So let's learn kedusha from there. Shiny boishes of pagam, but the reason why the father gets it is because there he's also hurt by it, because he's the one who marries her off, and if he can marry her off, then and now that her reputation was damaged, so he'll get a lot less money. Now we're not talking about actually the money of kedusha, because that's what we're trying to learn out. Who says it ends up with her? But just generally, his pick of people that he can marry off to has been limited, so he's been personally affected. So therefore, he's also been hurt by this baishav pagam, and that's why he's entitled to the money. But kedushin, who says it ends up with the father? If she's a naira, who says the money from the kedushin when she's a naira ends up with the father? Ela mistabra. Large, we go back to the original thing, we're comparing it, contrasting it to a master and a maid. The Torah says, that there's no money here, but ain't kesef, here there's no money, but there's money when it comes to marriage. So we're going to equate the two, yitzia, the kavasa kamai, something which is very similar. That is, it has to be something similar. That just like over there, he's talking about them that no money goes to the master. Or here also, no money money does go to the master, to the father. Says the Gemara, how can you compare the two? How can you compare the two? Over there, when he leaves, when she a maid leaves the master completely. But over here, when she leaves her father, she's engaged. She doesn't leave completely. When she doesn't leave completely, while she's engaged, the father still has rights over her. There completely leaves the rishus of her master. And so on. But you'd see but when she leaves her father, akati mechsra mesil chuppah, the father still has the right to go ahead. And who gives over? It's just only engagement. When it comes to the marriage, the father's the one who has to get handed over to the husband. So the father's still in control, and so the father is still in control to somewhat. How do you know that the money goes to the father? So you cannot know. It's not. You cannot really contrast the two. They're very different. So the Gemara, in certain respects, completely left the rishus of the father. How is that? Because now we learned it. But while she was a girl, the father has complete control, can annul all her vows. But now that she's engaged, it has to share with the husband. So even though it didn't completely leave the father because he still has control, but the fact that before it was unilateral, now that he has to consult the husband means he lost control. And therefore, it's a good contrast. They both lose control, and over there's no money, but over here there is money. So Gemara goes further. Star B, the mission says that while he has control over star and over B, and Minola, and how do you know that? On Makro, because it says that Hairo goes to the father that he can also force her, to have B with this person and get married. Makro says the pasuk that she leaves the first husband and she went to another husband. So it says ish acha, went to a second husband. So That is so iskish havois lador. We compare all marriages to the same. Just like when it comes to money, we're very established. The money ends up with the father. So too when it comes to kedushin of shtar, comes to kedushin of bia, it all totally in control of the father.